This episode's brought to you by everynowheremusic.com. Yep, you got that right. That's yours truly. So if this is an endeavor you'd like to support, please come and sign up for my newsletter at everynowheremusic.com. Every nowhere or every now here, depending on whichever way you prefer to look at it. Camellia is an absolute light. That's the most succinct way I can think of describing my encounter with her. She's also super generous and super broad-minded to just come onto this podcast when asked by a random dude on Instagram to do so. And, with musicians, you always have a gut feeling about what will resonate and what won't. And I always had this hunch that we get along. And I'm very glad to say that my gut was on point. We touch upon a lot of topics, a very broad range, but also deep, which is rare because it's usually breadth that gets sacrificed for depth in most cases. But this is one of those conversations which have proved to be an exception to that rule. So you folks are in for a treat. Before I go ahead, though, I would want to take a minute to remind you that this is an independent show. So if you want to support us, please go and subscribe to us on a podcast platform of your choice. Ideally, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're feeling particularly generous, give us a fantastic review as well. Additionally, this show is also sponsored by my online academy, which is the Holistic Musician Academy.com. You probably don't know this, but we have a bunch of flat discounts for all podcast listeners. So if this is something you're interested in, click on the link that's included in the episode notes and go get your discount for all courses that are included on this. Alright, without much further ado, please welcome Camellia. Hello fellow beings, welcome to Tapasya Loading, a safe space to attempt honest, raw and authentic conversation in homage to the ancient act of stoking a sacred fire. We are officially on tape, so I'm going to turn my video off. Welcome Camellia.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm alright, thanks. It's a little late in my part of the world where I currently am, which is India. I just got here last week to visit my parents. What time is where you at?
Right now it is 2:06 p.m. So it's afternoon here.
And where are you at?
I'm in Texas, Corpus Christi, Texas, which is probably about 3 hours from Houston.
Oh, nice. Sounds lovely. Is that where you've been based most of your life?
No, I moved here with my family, my husband and my 3-year-old son about a year ago. So we've been, we move around every few years because of the military. So my husband is active duty Navy. So we move a lot. Nice.
As were you, from what I gather.
Yes, I did 6 years in the Navy band. And that's actually where I met my husband. But we met in Japan while we were serving in the Navy band and traveling all over Southeast Asia, playing music. And yeah.
Fantastic. Mad respect.
Well, thanks.
I want to dig into that a little more later on. Yeah. I noticed your biography mentioned that you were born in Heidelberg, Germany.
Yes, this is true. Yeah. My dad was actually in the Army. So I was born on a military base, a U.S. military base, but in Heidelberg, Germany. So I was there for 2 years, so from like 0 to 2, and then we moved back to the States.
That's amazing. I actually lived in the Rhine-Neckar metropole region for 11 years.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah, I lived in Mannheim, which is not really Heidelberg, but they kind of share the same public transport system and so on. I don't know if you've heard of it, if you've been to Mannheim.
No, I do want to go back and visit. I don't remember much when I was there because I was still little, but it would be really cool to go back and visit and see Heidelberg and see a lot of other cool places.
When was the last time you were there?
I was born in 1989. So from 1989, 90, 91. So we left in 91 to come back to the States. And so, yeah, that was the last time.
Wow. So that's been a while. I can actually relate. I've never been back to the country. I spent the first 5 years of my life in, well, most of it anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, I can intimately relate. Do you think that change in your environment at such an early age affected you in your artistic approaches in any way, in a significant way anyway?
I think just being aware or being told that I was born in a different country kind of gives you this, or kind of gives me this feeling of being, a little more, I guess, cultural. Like I don't really claim anywhere as my home. I feel like, I'm from everywhere. I can go to any country. And so when I take that approach to music, it kind of just, it blurs the lines of separation of genres and stuff. It's just like, I can hear something and I can just take it and blend it in with, whatever I'm thinking or feeling. It almost gives me like a sense of freedom to have that. Oh, I was born over here. My dad is from West Africa. My dad was born in Nigeria. My mom is from the States, but if we go back far enough, the roots are probably traced back to certain parts in Africa. So you have this sense of just being from everywhere.
That's awesome. I'd like to think a very healthy mindset to have as an artist and a musician.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think especially as musicians, and I think not being confined to any type of rules or restrictions. And so yeah, even when I was in the military and traveling all over Southeast Asia, it kind of just gave me an appreciation for people and their culture and their music as well. So it's kind of just like, it's all, I believe, like a melting pot of creativity.
Yeah, that resonates. It's pretty evident to hear in the manner in which you approach your drums and the way they even look, at the risk of sounding somewhat superficial. It's evident to see that he is a person with multiple cultural influences. That resonates with me. We've already mentioned the military background a couple of times. Your husband still serves, and you were born on an army base. So is that a family thing? Is that a lineage thing?
I think it's more of a coincidence. I will say my dad has definitely suggested and kind of, made it like, hey, I really want you guys to go. Like, I have two other sisters, and my older sister went to the Air Force, and I went to the Navy. My dad's Army. So it's definitely something that he basically told all of us to do as a way to kind of set yourself up for success early on. So I went to the military right after high school. So I was, in boot camp, and then, overseas traveling as a young adult. And so it was kind of cool to have that, those experiences at such a young age, because it kind of opens up your mind.
Indeed.
To, just appreciate and to be more accepting of music, of everyone.
Indeed. You talk about this in an interview with the Guitar Center about how the prospect of being able to travel the world, meet people, and play music seemed like a no-brainer for you. You want to take us through that phase of your life a little?
You're talking about, you said the interview I did with Guitar Center, and you said traveling?
Yeah. You talk about how, when you found out that working as a musician in the army was an option, and how, it would let you travel freely and mix with, all these people in different parts of the world. That it seemed like a no-brainer. And you want to tell us a little more about that? How did you find out this was even an option?
Oh, okay. So when my drum instructor that I was studying with in high school, Miles Overton III. So he was active duty in the Army band, and I would take lessons from him every single week. And he would help me with reading, and he would help me with all the, music and percussion. And so every time I would go down to my lessons, there are pictures of him in uniform playing for the president of the United States, whoever it was. And so it was kind of that early exposure to seeing someone in the military and playing the drums. And so nice. I didn't even know every single branch of the military has a band. But I kind of just was like, oh, that's really cool that he does that. But after I finished high school, and I just had this thought of, I want to play professionally. I don't necessarily want to have to pay a lot of money to go to school. I want to be paid to travel. I want to be paid to play music. I want my education paid for. And so all of these things that I was kind of talking about fit into the realm of becoming a military musician. And so I went to see a recruiter, like most people do who want to join the military. And I said, hey, I want to join the Navy band. And my recruiter says, we don't have a band. And so it's such a small community that he was in the military and didn't even know that there was an actual Navy band. And so I had to go back. I talked to my instructor and I'm like, hey, I don't really know what to do, blah, blah, blah. I ended up finding the number on the website for the DC band. So I ended up calling over there and was like, I'm having issues kind of getting this whole thing set up. And basically he called over, was like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we're going to do. And so from there, I was able to get an audition set up. And so prior to auditioning, my recruiter, after he found out, there's a band, he was like, well, you know what? You just graduated from high school. And most of the musicians going in, after he looked it up, found out they all have at least a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in music.
Wow.
And here I am, a high school graduate trying to go into this program. And so he's like, I'm preparing for my audition. I'm like, I still just want to try. And so when I went in for my audition, I prepared my pieces with my instructor, Miles Overton, and, did my best, went in, I played my snare piece, and I was, hoping for the best, but I'm thinking they're going to be like, great job, but, maybe not today. But they were like, they looked at me and they said, you just graduated from high school? And I was like, yeah, I just finished high school. They were like, well, we can't tell you this officially, but you're in the band. I was just like, wow. So that set the stage for the entire audition. The audition went well. I got the email, being invited to, kind of become a part of the music program. From there,
amazing.
You have to make sure you're physically fit. You have to go to boot camp. You have to do all of these things that a normal Navy sailor will have to do. So wow. That kind of was the start of my my career as a military musician. And so that's kind of the introduction for me getting in. And so everything went well, though. Boot camp was boot camp, a lot of yelling, a lot of discipline, a lot of, early mornings waking up, a lot of push-ups, a lot of training, but it's just preparation. So when you get out, they call it the fleet. When you get out to your ship, when you get out to, for me, my band, you're ready to do the work that's necessary.
Wow, man, respect. So let me get this straight, just to clarify, the fitness levels you need to be in charge of are military, literally military grade. So you have to have the same fitness levels as that of a soldier.
Right. That's correct. Every branch is a little bit different. Like the Navy regulations are a little bit different than the Army, than the Marines, than the Air Force. So I would say the Marines have the hardest. They usually have to run 3 miles. For the Navy, you got to run 1.5 miles. You got to do a certain number of sit-ups, a certain number of push-ups, but everyone has to be able to do the same thing. Like when you sign on, when you go to boot camp, there's not oh, you're in the band, you don't have to do these push-ups. It's everyone has to do it. Everyone has to meet the standard. And if you don't meet the standard, eventually you'll get sent home. So there is a level of what you have to accomplish.
Did you ever find that rigorous level of physical training ever being in conflict with your musicianship? Because, playing drums is like a semi-athletic feat on its own, and you're doing all this extra fitness work. I'm sure, age is on your side at that phase of your life, but still, it's almost like double duties in a way. How did that feel for you?
That's a really good question. So boot camp, basically we focused on, it was boot camp. For my division, we were practicing, I was able to play drums once a week on like Saturdays, because we would be preparing to play for the people who were graduating. So prior sailors that were in boot camp, they would have us play for their graduation. So I had a little bit of like, of course, working out and then being able to keep up my chops on drums. But what I realized was after I got out of boot camp and I went to train at the Navy School of Music in Norfolk, like I started having a pain in my wrist and my arm, because I was trying to practice so much when I had basically took almost 2 months off of not being able to maintain my chops. And so there was a little bit of a struggle there. I even went to medical and I was like, I'm having some serious pain in my left wrist. And he basically was like, hey, you probably got to stop playing. And I was just like, this is my job. So that was a little bit of I managed to work through it, kind of just had to let it rest, play, but you got to play. You got to make sure you play kind of mindfully, not straining yourself, because with it, like you mentioned, like with drumming and with working out, you can easily injure yourself and then mess up your chances of actually playing your instrument. So it has to be a very good balance, and you just have to be mindful of, hey, if I'm doing these push-ups, I want to make sure my wrists are supported, that I'm not putting too much strain on my wrist, that my legs are. And so it's kind of building up. You could push yourself, but it's just making sure you are capable and you're not going to hurt yourself in the process. So it's kind of taking it slow. And prior to going to boot camp, I was training for about 3 or 4 months, just slowly working myself into being able to meet the standards required. So, because I knew, I was like, even something as simple as running, like if you are not running like on a daily basis or weekly basis or whatever, if you just get up and start running, you're gonna have shin splints. You're gonna have all these things that can prevent you from playing your instrument. So that was kind of, even despite my training and stuff, like after I got out of boot camp, I had a little bit of a trial tribulation where I had to kind of just sit back and, hey, okay, this is what's going on. Let me try to relax. Don't stress over it too much. Take it easy and gradually kind of build myself into being able to play again.
Nice. I mean, ideally, our musician's workout will be fine-tuned for the specific physical requirements, being as it is that, playing a musical instrument is actually an above average physical feat. But I mean, you're training to be a soldier on one hand and be a musician at the same time. But it sounds like it gave you a very specific brand of resilience that paid off long-term. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I guess, like I mentioned, it's kind of just like, it was a trial. And if I, when I was in A school and when I was at my, in Norfolk at the School of Music for the Navy, like if that was the one thing that was going to stop me, then it would have been something that, I think I would have never, gotten past, because like, it's like you have these tests and it's like, how are you going to deal with it? How are you going to overcome these trials? And so, just something like that, where it was like, I had to figure it out. The doctor on one hand was saying, hey, you shouldn't play drums anymore, basically. And I was like, all right, obviously I'm going to continue to play drums, but how can I go about this in a very smart way so I don't continue to injure myself, and I can build up my muscles that I had previously to be able to do both, to be able to play and to be able to run and to be able to do push-ups and sit-ups and planks and everything that's required without causing any injury.
Fantastic. I'm curious. I mean, I side gig as a personal trainer for musicians and artists. So I'm really curious. What would you say was the crux of your solution in making sure that you stayed on track and could refute the doctor's orders without actually all going all right?
Yeah, it was, I guess it was just me. It was like I had to pick one, right? My focus is music. My focus is drumming. So when I'm doing any type of physical activities, whether it's running, I know that I'm not gonna I'm gonna push myself, but I'm not gonna push myself to the point where I can injure myself. And I think we all kind of have that like window where we're like, hey, I can go a little bit further, but I'm gonna be like completely tired, or I'm gonna be in pain the next day. Like I would always, I know I could go there, but I would always be like, but my focus is drumming, so I'm not gonna try to push myself that far.
Yeah.
And now, so it would be different if my focus was more of to be an athlete. And at one point, that was my focus. I was playing basketball, and drumming kind of was at the second hand. And so I think it's just a matter of balance and what you want to focus on. And so if you want to focus on music and that's your strong suit, and that's where your heart is, then you kind of almost have to put everything second. Like I'm not gonna do this because this could possibly, cause an injury, or this could possibly, so.
Yeah, it sounds like a tough call, because I can imagine you would have been a gifted athlete as well.
Well, thanks. Yeah, a lot of people meet me and they're like, it looks like you run track, or it looks like, you're a basketball player. And I think I could have, and for a while I was on the basketball team in middle school and stuff. So nothing like super, super, super crazy, but I do have that athletic ability, that athletic built, where I could just, you kind of just have this natural, you could look at someone and be like, you just have this natural talent to do this thing. I definitely felt that way, but I was like, hey, this is my focus. I mean, even when I was in the military, I was the command fitness leader while I was in Japan. So I was I was the assistant to like helping people with, their sit-ups and their fitness scores and how to help them train. So it was definitely something that was there. And even though music was my focus, drumming was my focus, I was still able to excel in the athletic realm as well.
That's so impressive. It's very apparent to see, by the way. I can relate from a very indirect manner. I've always had a relationship with martial arts, and at a certain point I was seriously considering competing, and I really, really wanted to. In fact, personally, I've always thought that, athleticism, or, is also an art at the end of the day, and at some point you notice parallels between practicing an instrument and practicing any form of physical art, let's just say. And it's hard to kind of remember, hey, you do have to make that choice, and it can be such a tough choice. In my case, I just had to make the choice to not compete, because I can't not get competitive when I'm competing. That's the whole point.
I see.
So I had to live with keeping it more of a wellness practice, for lack of a better term. But not to go off on one, I'm curious. How did your peers, your musician peers, how did they cope with the physical demands of that job?
Well, I will say some of the guys and girls I worked with while I was in the military, some of them struggled with the physical requirements. Staying at a certain weight. Being able to do and run have a certain time for a mile and a half, like some of them struggle with it. So on one hand, I'm trying to create a balance. And then on the other hand, you have people that love playing their instrument. They're great at their instrument, but then they struggle with the requirements to even be able to stay in the military. So it's kind of interesting. And it was interesting to watch and to witness, people who love to play music and be in the military, but that opportunity be in jeopardy because they can't maintain a certain weight, or they can't complete the physical requirements for their run, or their push-ups or their sit-ups or their planks.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
In fact, it's such a polar opposite to the regular narrative of what a musician's lifestyle usually is, right? There's so much so many unhealthy associations often associated with musicians' life, especially the younger ones, drinking, drugs, partying, hanging hard. And here you are, fresh out of high school, training at military grade athleticism and keeping your chops up, building your career. It's a refreshing take. On a musical career.
Right.
I'm also curious on how your musical peers, many of whom you say had college degrees, reacted to a high school kid being their equal. How was that? Were you welcomed, or was there a lot of competition? What was the vibe like?
It was a little bit of both. And for the most part, people were pretty accepting, especially like if you come in, you know the music, you can play your instrument. No one really, really cares like what your background is, as long as you can hold down the spot.
Nice.
And so that was kind of the of course they know you can look at me and be like, hey, you're really young, and you got these people in the band that are 30 plus years old, have all of this experience, but here I am, in the same kind of boat. And I think most people, they were okay with it, honestly. And I thought that was pretty cool. For me, myself, I was always just, really nice and really kind to everyone. So it was never like anything on my part where I was like, you know what, you guys are treating me differently because I'm just a kid. Or I honestly felt like everyone was really helpful, really nice to me. And just, they wanted me to succeed. It was kind of just like this kind of like this family type of vibe where it was like, you're the drummer of this band and we want the music to sound good. We want you to do well. And so
awesome.
that was pretty cool.
So you had each other's backs?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
awesome.
Definitely.
Awesome. Those are the best families, the best kind of bands. Do you feel that having the chance to work with more mature musicians from such an early onset would act to your advantage in the long run?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, currently, I think back on my early experiences and the stuff that I kind of got into when I was younger. And I really do believe that having people that were older than me and still like kind of encouraging me and playing the music, I think that was really, really helpful, honestly.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's like what I recommend the most to my students. I had the privilege too to start off working with way more experienced and mature musicians at a very early age. At the time, I didn't even realize what a privilege it was. It's only now in hindsight I realize how much time it saved me. But I'm also wondering, and this would be something my listeners would be very interested in, what was it that gave you that solid background that helped you hold your ground amidst people who were clearly more experienced and had all these degrees and whatnot? You obviously had a very strong musical foundation prior already. You want to tell us a little about that? A bit of a rewind?
Well, yeah, definitely. So basically up until I started taking lessons with my instructor, Miles Overton the third, I was kind of just teaching myself stuff, going to the band director. Hey, can you help me with this? Asking questions, so until I started taking lessons and I started to get better at reading music and kind of building up my confidence in that type of setting. Prior to that, if I tried to go into the military band or audition, I feel like I wouldn't have felt ready, but I kind of got that confidence working with him and kind of just being exposed to so many different styles. Like we would come in and he'd be like, okay, we're going to play jazz. Okay, we're going to read this chart. Okay, we're going to do our scales on the mallets. We're going to do this. I want you to prepare this snare drum piece.
Awesome.
So basically by the time it was time for me to audition, I looked at the requirements for the audition materials and we had already done everything that was on that list. So he didn't even know until probably about a month, and neither did I until that I was going to even audition, because that wasn't really my plan. My plan was to go to college after I finished high school. But, after I decided, hey, you know what? I really don't want to necessarily have to pay all this money and get in debt. And so when I took the information to him, he was like, to my instructor, he was like, you can definitely do this. And so it was it was 3+ years of kind of being built up and, you know, having these lessons with him and then having something that may be hard and getting past it. And these, you know, so that was probably what really did it, I think. And so I had that level of confidence, but still open and willing to learn and not thinking like, hey, I know everything, because I don't.
Beautiful. That's like the perfect mindset to start off on your musical journey. 3 years of study. That sounds pretty solid. That's like a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of tough to get in with him because he had a lot of students. Like everyone wanted to take lessons with him, and because he was working in the DC area, living in Virginia, and that's where I was living at the time with my parents. But it was just, I remember my mom said she called them several times, and eventually I was able to get in, and I just remember going and just being so grateful that I was able to take lessons with like the best instructor, you know, in the world. It's really because of his vast knowledge. Like, we're just not going to sit and play drum set. We're going to play concert snare. We're going to play marching snare. We're going to play mallets. We're going to play, like, we're going to touch everything. And percussion and drums is such a wide range of instruments.
Indeed.
You know, we did our best to kind of go over everything.
Yeah, it's very evident to see. I hadn't realized you played tuned percussion as well. One of the questions I was planning on asking you later on anyways is how did you strike that balance between such a sense of mastery over both the trap kit and hand drums? I noticed you play very legit congas as well. Was that part of your earlier education as well?
It was, so with Mr. Overton, like he would do it on the drum. He would do it like on the snare. Like when we start our lessons, we might do like rudiments on the snare. And so we've isolated just one drum. And so when I kind of transitioned to playing with my hands later on, it was kind of like I had to think back on stuff that we had played and then just had to kind of learn the technique. But we didn't really do hand percussion too much, but we did isolate specifically the snare drum. And then to the point where I was like, you know what? I can play the snare drum with my fingers. I can play the snare drum like it's a conga, like it's a bongo, and get all of these tones and sounds out of the instrument. And so that's kind of where the beginning stages of my creativity started to begin. And I didn't even really know it.
Beautiful.
Because I was so kind of structured with marching and all this stuff.
I feel like when you use the word structured, that kind of really describes your approach very well. You obviously had a very clear idea of how you want to approach your instrument. You also talk about how you knew the very first moment you heard drums that this was your instrument, how the frequency range resonated with you, how the entire vibe of it was like from the very first onset, this is it, this is what I'm going to play. I'm a little jealous in a good way because I took ages to figure out. I went to college to study piano and figured out that I'm actually a bass player at heart. And I'm just, when I say jealous, I mean that in the best way possible. I'm in awe of people who have that sensitivity at an early age to know, hey, this is it, this is what I'm going to do, and do it. You want to give us some pointers on how that came about?
Well, yeah, like I was, let's see, I was 5 years old and I was sitting in church, and this is one of my first memories, one of my earliest memories of watching my cousin play the drums and my uncle is on the bass. And it was just awe, this amazement, just like a feeling of I can do that. I want to do that. I'm interested in that. And just being like, just really wanting to learn everything about the instrument. And so I remember going to my mom and my dad and being like, I'm 5 years old. I'm like, hey, I really want to play the drums. And they're just
5 years old. Amazing.
Yeah. They're like, you don't know how to play. And so they're just like, they're thinking, this really loud instrument, this little girl doesn't know how to play. And so it was through my persistence and my dedication, like every single Christmas, I was like, hey, this is what I want for Christmas. There was so much passion and persistence behind, just the want and the desire to learn the instrument. So I was just constantly asking, and I was in school playing and banging on everything and trying to make rhythms and music out of everything. But my parents, they were like, it took them a while to kind of, to get the drum set and to start, like, I guess, investing in instruments that could, help me begin to express my rhythmic ideas. But eventually they did. And it was about when I was 13. My mom bought my first drum set, and I just remember setting it up and playing it for hours and practicing and practicing and practicing and recording myself and listening back. Yeah, I would record myself. My dad had an old tape player, and I would take these tapes and I would record myself. I would listen back and I'd be like, fantastic. Oh man, I got something to work on. Like this, you have this idea, like your sound is so good. And you listen back and you're like, oh man, the timing's off, or this is off. And I would just go back and record it. And then I started getting into things where I would start layering rhythms. I would record one rhythm, have another tape player, two tape players next to each other, record something on top of that, mix it in together. And then I could start to hear how those two rhythms were working together. And so it was, I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, just kind of being creative. But it was kind of interesting, especially now when I look back on it. But it was a lot of, just dedication, a lot of desire, a lot of passion, a lot of persistence in convincing my parents, like, hey, I'm really into this. I really want to study this. And I feel like through, the having to wait for so many years, because I became interested in drums when I was 5. And I got my first drum set when I was 13. So throughout that entire time, it was everything in school. I want to be involved in anything related to music in school. I want to, the practice pad, the drumsticks, the rudiments, all of that stuff. I was just trying to consume it. So
that's 8 years of waiting. Shows a lot of patience and a lot of resilience indeed.
Yeah.
Also, sounds like you had a producer's mindset from the very beginning. If you were basically overdubbing yourself on that tape recorder,
yeah,
broader headspace, amazing. I was actually about to ask earlier, how do your parents respond to your passion for an instrument like the drums? Because it is a major investment for parents to make. It's not just the money; it's also the space, it's the noise levels. It takes a lot of trust and love for your kid to buy them a drum kit, I think.
That's true.
So shout out to your folks. Much love to them for having stoked that fire.
Right.
What kind of repertoire? I want to move on into this later part of your career in a bit, but the one last thing I'm curious about before you started your professional musician's journey was, what kind of repertoire did you start off working with your music teacher in high school? Where are your musical roots primarily in? Because it's hard to say when one hears you play, it could be such a diverse background, a diverse list of influences. Sometimes it sounds like you grew up on Latin American music. Sometimes it sounds like jazz. Sometimes it could be like, I don't know, contemporary New York stuff. I'm really curious where the fundament of your musical roots lie.
Well, initially, so a lot of what we were studying was almost kind of based off of what I was having to prepare for school. So when I started studying with Mr. Overton when I was in high school. So I was in the marching band. And so everything was very rudimental.
Right.
So learning all of my drum rudiments for 2 years, I was in charge of the drum line. So all the guys in the drum line, I had to be on top of, the double stroke rolls, the single stroke rolls. So learning all of these different types of rudiments to apply to marching band, and then learning the music. And so everything was I think of marching band music as very structured, very in time, very meticulous. Indeed. And so that was kind of my beginning stages. I would take, the music to him and say, oh, I might be having issues with something. How can we work on this? And we would dissect it. And then it was also concert. It was classical. For half the year in school, we would be doing like symphonic band. And so it's respect for the triangle, respect for the crash cymbals. Maybe you have to play a mallet part. Maybe you have to play a bell part. Maybe it's resting for, 40, 50 something measures to prepare yourself to do a really big crash. So it's a lot of listening. So that was kind of what I was doing in school. But outside of school, I was listening to a lot of, pop music. I was really interested in Latin music, and I was studying and looking at drummers like, what's his name? Antonio Sanchez.
Oh yeah.
And watching his left foot going back and forth between like a wood block and the hi-hat, and just being so like in awe of how he was doing that.
Oh yeah.
Also Akira Jimbo from Japan doing stuff with the left foot. So that started really to inspire me, and almost like take these these thoughts of like being restricted, like you have to play the drums like this, to just being like, oh wow, there's no rules really. Like you can do whatever you want. You can create whatever you want with these instruments. You can create your own instruments. You can take this cymbal and put it on your snare. You can take this tambourine and, put it on your tom and just get these different types of sounds. And so that kind of was the beginning stages of kind of opening up my creative mind by watching some of those guys
beautiful
do stuff like that. And then
beautiful. I love the name you dropped there, Antonio Sanchez. Love that guy. I had the chance to host him at college as a student rep.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can confirm, I was literally on guard outside their rehearsing room, making sure all the starstruck students wouldn't, barge in. And I can confirm, listening to them rehearse, like this was Scott Coley, Pat Metheny, and Antonio Sanchez in the same room. We would jam in every single day, and they were rehearsing for their gig next day. It's like, how the hell do these same amps and that same drum kit sound so different? I literally prayed on that same thing this morning. So
wow.
Yeah. I mean, Antonio Sanchez, El Negro Hernandez, these are people who kind of changed the entire landscape of the drum kit, right? In a way, like the whole. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to hijack the conversation. My apologies. Please
no, I mean, that's really cool to know someone who's met him. I would love to meet him and to just kind of pick his brain, and it was really inspiring to watch him and watch videos of him playing.
Yeah. And
so that was kind of my where I kind of began to step outside of the box. But a lot of the stuff that I was playing with the Navy band was a little more, okay, like we're playing big band stuff, or we're preparing for a holiday concert, and we're playing more symphonic music. So it was kind of like always having that desire to play really out there types of rhythms and stuff like that, but also coming back to the more traditional side of drumming and music, if you will. Yeah. And after I got out of the military and Afrobeat started to get really big, and I started kind of listening to the rhythms that were coming out of that stuff, and I was like, you know what, this really sounds like Latin music. And then I started studying the clave a little bit. Okay, 3/2 clave, 2/3 clave, and how they're similar and who influenced who, but it was just kind of interesting to listen to that and then try to just take bits and pieces of it. And even when I post stuff, people are like, oh, this sounds like it's from, Brazil. This sounds like it's from Portugal. This sounds like it's from, West Africa. And it's just like, it sounds like it. I'm inspired from different, styles. And then I'm just pulling stuff and I'm kind of making it into my own thing. So.
I know this might be a silly question to ask. I know you're North American, but do you think you heard like an ancestral strain in those sounds in some way?
Oh, yeah, definitely. When I was growing up, my dad had recordings of stuff of like traditional talking drum and all of these instruments from his village. Because my dad was born in Edo State, Nigeria, in the Afoa village. So he has like all of this, this traditional type of music and recordings, and he would play it. Like it would be being played in the house. And I believe that and for me, like I can listen to something a few times and it will come out in my playing. And it's just something that's always I've kind of noticed if I'm able to remember and trace it back, I'm like, oh, that's where I heard that. And so, yeah, it was kind of interesting after I finished, after I got out of the military, and I was kind of almost having like this sense of where do I want to go? Where do I want to go musically? And I remember wanting to kind of venture into like African rhythms and drumming and stuff like that. And I remember asking my dad, like, you know, should I go and study? Should I go to Nigeria and study? And he was like, you already have it. Like, it's already there. And I was just like, and it was just kind of this sense of like, I just have to let it flow more so than like overthinking it, you know? And so I listened and I applied, and this kind of creative, you know, free type of drumming began to take form.
Beautiful. At which point did you notice this? There's this wonderful little quote you put out there on an interview. It goes something on the lines of, I started to hear the notes in between the notes, in reference to the manner in which you were hearing the 16th notes. When was this? And is that something we could request you to elaborate a little on?
I think that was the interview I did with Guitar Center, but
yeah, I think so.
That was probably, after I started kind of like to release like all of the, like you learn all the rules, right? Like you learn the rudiments, and it's just like, what do you do with these? Do you want to just play them as is, or do you want to try to like almost put this, you know, free type of energy on top of these rhythms? And so like when I would start thinking of the 16th notes, and I would turn on a metronome, and you can go 1E into 2E, or you can kind of stretch that and move it and have that flow a little bit more, like you're still playing 16th notes, but there's a little bit more of like a pull in the right or left direction. So I began to like start messing with fluid time and more just very interesting type of, you know, creative vibe. And I really started to hone in on that when I was initially when we were in Texas a few years ago, and my husband was doing flight school training. We had a separate garage, and I had all my drums in the garage, and I was really kind of restricted as far as what I could set up. And so the garage was pretty small. And so I kind of just grabbed what I could as far as like, you know, maybe the cajon. I would make these loops, and I kind of just began to start creating these very like eccentric, these very out there rhythms, especially when you bring in loops. I would make these rhythms and like these loops, maybe with like djembe and bongos and congas, and then I would start playing on top of it. And I would listen back, and I'm like, oh wow, like this is really interesting. This is really cool. And I just began to start sharing it. I remember I shared a video late one night, and I woke up the next morning, it was like over 10,000 views. And I was like,
wow,
whoa, like
overnight? Holy shit. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I was just like, oh wow. So I just kind of began to explore more of that, and kind of just began to tap into more of that type of, you know, I'll call it free type of rhythms and drumming. But it was like you mentioned with the 16th note, studying with the metronome, right? Turning on a metronome and having it play strict 16th notes, but then deciding like, I'm going to only play the E, or I'm only going to play the or I'm going to shift that E and not necessarily play it exactly right in time. I'm going to move it a little bit, so it's a little more swung. And so like when I started to kind of mess with that stuff, it kind of just also was a whole nother level of creativity, because I started to hear rhythms within rhythms already.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can relate. It's my ancestry lies in India, and I have spent some time studying some of my ancestral rhythms.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you. And it's it's such a different, it's such a shift in perspective once we think in phrases, for example, instead of 16th notes, which eventually might be 16th or 8th notes or whatever. But it's just, there's an entirely different dimension of freedom once you realize, wow, at the end of the day, that's just one atom of a phrase. What if I just shift that phrase, and still stay on the grid without letting the grid guide me, and me try and just kind of guide the grid instead, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. From your point of view, for younger musicians who are trying to delve in that area, where's the best place to start? You already made a few references, start on the E, or, try and shift that E a little, or start on the, whichever subdivision they want to choose. Apart from that, from a mindset point of view, is there anything you would like to recommend on your side?
I will say what helped me the most is vocalizing, nice. Saying the rhythms out loud. So totally even today, if I'm going to try to work on something, I'll simplify it. I'll slow it down. I'll make it super, super slow. Keep myself honest. I'll turn on a metronome, and I might say if I'm working on, maybe I'm working on my hands, I might try to get my feet doing something like super easy quarter notes, bass drum, hi-hat, bass drum, hi-hat, bass drum. And then after I get that going steady, I might try to just start to begin to think about what I want to play. If it's like E, one E, like I want to keep my feet consistent without being affected by playing this syncopated note or this syncopated rhythm. And so slowing it down was really, really helpful. And playing to a metronome was really, really helpful. And for me, the Roland, what I started making loops on was the Roland SPD SX or Roland SPD 30. And I still have it because that's one of the first ones that really, really began to open up my mind, because sometimes I would have an idea and I would almost need someone to play it for me, and in order to play the other thing that I want to play on top of it. And so making the loop and then being able to hear it, it opens up the doorway to play the other thing and for them to both interact without it being like too weird. And so that was really what helped me a lot. And especially with, quantizing, if you want to keep it exactly, or if you don't have very good time, you can quantize it and make sure it's exactly in time. Sometimes it does change the rhythm too much, but if it doesn't, it's helpful. But yeah, that was what really, really helped me start to kind of tap into a different type of realm of rhythms.
Beautiful. How do you feel this new approach translate in ensemble situations once you started incorporating them? Did your colleagues just latch on immediately, or were there ever points where you felt like, we might not be on the same page?
I think so. Let's see. I played a jazz festival a couple weeks ago, and during a solo, I took liberty to kind of add some of this stuff in there that I've worked on. And because one of the most important thing is when you're going to present these rhythms is to make sure that you have them solid enough to be able to hold the natural rhythm down without affecting or messing up the other musicians. So that was something that I definitely worked on. And so now when I pull it out and I'll play these, these different types of syncopated rhythms and stuff, people can appreciate them. The other musicians were like, oh, wow, that was really cool. Rather than being like, oh man, that really messed me up. I didn't know where you were going. So that was part of, I guess, my preparation and playing this stuff slow, because sometimes it may be hard and sometimes people know how to play this stuff. Like they know it, but then it just doesn't have a good feel. And so that was also something that I wanted to make sure. So through practicing it very, very slow, I would say I spent a whole year probably just playing the left foot stuff really slow, like messing with the wood block between my heel and the toe between the hi-hat. And I worked it so slow for a really long time till I got it really comfortable. And then I was able to start moving it into actually playing it with, other people.
Beautiful. That's exactly it. I love the words you're using there because, like these time-stretched polyrhythmic kind of vibe. It's not the kind of thing. I mean, sure, one could try and put it down on paper and analyze it, but learning from an analysis, I feel like that can be extremely counterproductive, and I'm not even sure that's the right way to go about it. And I notice a lot of musicians take that approach. They try and learn it off paper or off an analysis, and in my experience, that tends to backfire.
Yeah, it could be difficult. Especially, I don't know. It's just like sometimes it's just this extra. It's just this extra goo that's involved with making it feel really, really good. I will say I did study books of like Latin rhythms and like the 6/8 type of what is it? Not 6/8 samba, but zing ba chika the doom ba. What is that called? I forget. But what was it?
Nanigo?
It could be. It's not coming to me right now. But it's like these 6/8 type of grooves, where these Latin 6/8 type of grooves, where you can kind of pull them out, but you just got to make sure that they feel really, really comfortable. And so, like, when I was reading them in the book and trying to like figure out how to play this from reading the notes, it was more so like I had to go back and listen in context, find songs that were using these rhythms, and then coming back to the music and be like, oh, okay. It's context, not exactly. It is written correctly, but there's a little bit like extra feel, and so it is really hard to kind of explain that on a piece of paper. Like we're gonna tell you like how do you explain a feel? You kind of just have to have listened enough, have experienced it enough, have tried it yourself and recorded yourself and listen back and being like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm too ahead. Or maybe I'm not, in the correct space or the correct feel to be able to realize kind of where you need to be. And that's why recording is, till this day, I record myself all the time because I might have over like a course of an hour or 2 hours of practicing. I might have played something that could turn into a song or, transform into something else. And so I try to, capture that. And sometimes that's usually what I'll share on Instagram or YouTube is like a little snippet of something that I was, working on. And I was like, oh, wow, that was really cool. And now I have a little idea that I can take and expand.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think, that whole musical phase where non-European rhythms started being published on paper, that marks a very specific phase in musical history because the world was confronted with the fact that there are musical cultures which simply cannot be expressed through paper alone. It's great to use it as a reference, but you cannot learn that musical culture off paper alone. And I think it's great. I also feel the cultures where these musical forms have their roots and also benefit because it forces a lot of us to kind of unpack the intricacies of it on a more somewhat intellectual level. I have nothing against it. But I think it's a beautiful, time in the world where both of these worlds are coming together, where it's not just about following your own body and going with the flow, but also unpacking what's going on there and kind of valuing the intricacies of these cultures we oftentimes take for granted. Like, I grew up with Konakol and Indian rhythms and all these complexities. And up until I went to college in Europe, I didn't even know that, it wasn't common to not be able to scat in 7/8 or 9/8 or 13 something.
Wow.
Yeah, it sounds horrible when I say it, right? It sounds terrible. So arrogant. But it's true. It's way later. That being said, I failed my first rhythm studies semester.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't clap black dots of paper the right way, and that kicked my ass in a good way. And eventually I found my way around it. So, but yeah, it's an interesting time to live in the world.
Right. That's true.
The clash, right? So what happens now? I mean, you've done your time in the military. You're back, but your career then takes off, right? You start touring with the Grammy Award-winning artist.
Yeah. So after I finished school, so I got out of the military in 2014, and I wanted to finish my undergrad. So I went to the University of Maryland online because my husband was still active duty, and we're moving every 2 years or so. And so online school was the best option for me. But I ended up studying digital media and web technology, just because I knew I wanted to continue to play music, but I knew I was going to have a social media presence and know how to create content and, share my work in that aspect. So that's what I went to school for. And so in 2018, I finished. And in 2019, I was going on a tour. Like, I made a website. I got Akhamie Music LLC. Like, I did everything I could to kind of set myself up to be recognized and noticed on the internet. Take the name Akhamie Music on every single platform, and just began to share my work and what I was doing. And it was kind of funny because, like, I thought to myself, like, I'm not of Latin descent, but I really did want to play with a Latin artist. And so when I got the email, like, we would love for you to go on tour with us, and I was just like, wow, like, I'm doing a pretty good job with my rhythms. Like, this is so cool. Buika was her name.
Awesome.
And she's interesting because she's like, her family is from Spain, but her origin is she's from Guinea. So so she's like African, but she speaks Spanish, and she was raised in Spain. And so it was really cool to kind of tour. It was cool to tour with her, and we toured for 2019 up until the shutdown.
So she hit you up online, sent you a mail, and said, "Oh, I want you to come tour with me."
Yeah. So it was October 2018. So it was the prior year. They were like trying to piece together this all-girl group to tour for 2019. And so it was kind of interesting because I was pregnant. Like, I was probably a few months pregnant. So
wait, you went on tour pregnant?
No, I didn't go on tour pregnant. I went to the first rehearsal it was in Miami. So I was living in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. And I got offered to do this tour, and I didn't want to say no. I mean, like, I've never met the group. I don't know. So I just wanted to at least, give myself the opportunity to go play and to go check it out. So I went. Cool. No one knew I was pregnant. I didn't even look pregnant until about the last couple months. And then everyone was like, "Whoa, you're pregnant." Wow. But so I went to the to the recording session, the rehearsal, if you will, and everything was great, and it turned out great. And so, like, I didn't mention anything, but I get back home, and then the schedule starts to come out for the following year. My son's supposed to be born in March of 2019, and I'm looking at the schedule, and we're supposed to be in, all these France. We're supposed to be in France, and I'm like, oh man, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I eventually was like, I talked to my instructor. I actually called him. I was like, "Hey, Mr. Overton, I'm supposed to go on tour for March and for the year, and Julian's supposed to be born in March." And he is like, "Well, you got to tell them, right?" And I was like, yeah, I know. So I prepared my email and I sent it to them, and it's just like, hey, I try to be as chill as possible. It's like, hey, my son's gonna be born in March. I'm gonna need a couple weeks off. And they're like, "What? You're having a baby?" They're like, "Congratulations!" So they were like really supportive and really happy. But basically, awesome. I got cut. They were like, "Hey, we can't have you go on tour or be traveling pregnant," because I was getting really close to the due date. I was probably when I told them it was around Christmas time, and they were just like, "Yeah, we can't do this." And so I was like, obviously super heartbroken. I wanted to be there, and I wanted to do the tour. But I just believed in my heart, like, I'm still going to do it. I don't know how, I'm still going to do it. And that's what I kept telling myself. So my son was born. They began the tour in January. They went over to California. They were going, they had gigs set up and stuff like that. And my son was born in March. And I'm still watching the schedule, and they're still doing the gigs. They got a girl to come in and to play drums. And actually she's the drummer for Carol G right now. Like, so it was pretty cool. So eventually Julian's born March 31st, and I'm taking care of him, making sure all the milk is prepared, blah, blah, blah. And it was in like May, they hit me up. They were like, "Hey, do you want to go on tour with us next week? You want to take over the job?" And I was like,
awesome.
I was like, okay, hold on, what? I was like, obviously I wanted to do this, but now I'm like actually logistically thinking about how this is going to actually be possible. He was 2 months old. My son was 2 months old at the time. And they're asking me to go to Spain like in a couple weeks. And so it worked out, all glory to God, because I had enough milk. I was really adamant of not doing the whole, formula and stuff. So I didn't even know why, but I had a whole freezer full of milk. I was pumping. Everything was taken care of.
Amazing.
Julian's great grandmother was there. She was like, "I would be honored, to help you and to watch him." And so literally within like a couple weeks, I was getting on a plane. I was traveling. I would go away for about 5 to 6 days at a time. And then I would come back and take care of him. And, so it was like, it was a tour, but it was not like a very strenuous tour where we were gone for several weeks at a time. We were gone for like days, like 5, 6 days at a time. So we would be traveling we traveled to Israel to play the Red Sea Jazz Festival. Right. And as soon as we get off the stage, we're literally heading back to get on the plane to come back. So they were really accommodating, and they did their best to try to help me to be able to do the gig, but also get me back to be able to take care of my son. So it was a cool,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. And I'm just grateful I had the opportunity, even being a brand new mom, to be able to still live out your dreams and to play music and to travel was super, super cool.
You sound like the person who's not satisfied dealing with one challenge at a time. You always need a minimum of 2. You had to be an athlete and a pro musician at the same time. You had to be a mom and an international touring artist at the same time. One just doesn't do it for you, does it?
I don't know. I just don't. I guess I'm just not like. I've realized that I don't tell myself no. Right? I'm going to say this is possible. Yeah. I don't know how it's possible, but I'm going to keep that door of possibility open. And I believe that doing that kind of literally keeps the door open, because I didn't shut it. And so a lot of people, when they have a kid or they, something happens, they're like, "Well, I can't do this anymore." And then your mind says, "Okay, you can't do it anymore." So it stops looking for ways to make this thing that you want to happen. And so when I got cut and, they're like, "Hey, we can't do this," I did not close the door. I said, "This is going to happen. And I don't know how, but this is going to happen." And so it kind of just worked out, and everything kind of fell into place. Everything that I needed fell into place for me to have this opportunity to do this. And Julian was taken care of, and, got to have time with his great grandmother, and my mom came in, and my sister came in. Everyone was, there to support. And so that was really necessary, amazing, obviously, to have that comfort of leaving this 2-3 month old baby, with family. So it was okay.
You're obviously equipped to deal with that kind of challenges. You reckon it had something to do with your military training as well? Just those years of discipline and the resilience. Do you think that had a role to play, or were you always that way?
I think the military definitely helped, because it almost reinforced, I think, what was already there. I've always kind of I've always kind of been a persistent, a passionate person. And so when you add that discipline on top of it from the military, and, you know, it kind of just, I think it just made it more, you know, so, but I think I think it helped. Yeah.
Because most musicians would have burnt out halfway. They would have burnt out before they even gotten started with the project. 2 projects like that, you know. Motherhood and going on tour with an artist they really want to go on tour with. So hats off. I mean, I really mean that.
Well,
I mean,
thank you.
That sounds lame when I say it the way I do. No, but seriously, I mean, hats off is all I can really say. I do wonder, though, that phase where you like, I want to go on tour with this artist who I really like. I always wanted to do that. But I'm also pregnant, which is pretty awesome. And I just got cut, but I'm still going to keep the faith that it's going to happen. What's your source of psychological sustenance in those phases where you know things don't seem to be going exactly the way it would be optimal, but you still steer the universe, for lack of a better term, your way? Well, you know, what are your tools to have that happen?
Well, I mean,
Did that sound too vague?
No, I think I understand what you're asking. I'm a very spiritual person. And so I believe in God, and I believe in our destiny. And I believe that we have trials and tribulations in our life that are going to make us stronger, or, you know, possibly break us, but you might have the, you know, opportunity to get back up. And so I believe if we're here and we have the possibility, the option to think the best possible thing for our life, then that's what we should do. And a lot of people, even myself included, we kind of get discouraged when something doesn't go our way.
Yeah.
And in that time when something's not going your way, you could still say, I believe that even though this is what it appears to be today, I'm still going to believe that it's going to be like this tomorrow. And that's kind of hard to do, because then we're literally speaking against what we see. And a lot of people don't even, you know, they would say that's not smart to do. They're like, look at what's happening. And how could you think that this is going to happen? It's like, well, I'm going to sit here and focus my attention on what I want rather than what I don't want. So
bingo. Yeah, that's it's a classic distinguishing between creator mode or victim mode.
Exactly.
Yeah, more power to that. It's also very evident in a lot of the themes you explore as an artist. One of the first songs you released was based on the theme of I Choose Love. Was that the title of the song, I Choose Love? Yeah,
so that was the album. The album was I Choose Love, and then there was also a song on there called I Choose Love as well. But yeah, that was the album kind of was born out of after the tour. And so after the tour, and we know kind of going into a shutdown, and I kind of had this kind of like experience where I was in really, really, really bad pain for basically 3 years, but it started to get worse after I had my son.
I'm sorry to hear.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Like the whole story. Like I got out of the military. I was having some issues with my teeth. Went to the dentist. You know, they did some fillings. They did some work or whatever. But after that, I couldn't chew on the left side of my mouth for like 3 years. And then after I had my son, I started to have jaw issues. And eventually, basically, I was on tour. Where were we? We were in Canada. And I'm like, man, I am in some serious pain. Like I'm having these like major headaches, the left side of my face. I was having like almost spasms. And so when I got home, I was like, I need to do something about it. And I'm not one to really take medication. So I was like racking my brain. I'm like, you know, my midwife, when I was pregnant, mentioned that I needed to go to a chiropractor because Julian wasn't in the right position. And so, you know, I was like, oh, okay, I need to go see a chiropractor. So I went to the chiropractor, and he looks and he's like, okay, your C1 and your C5 vertebrae are out of alignment.
Whoa.
And I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm like, how do we fix it? Let's fix it. And he's like, well, you know, it's going to take some time because, you know, it took some time for you to get it out of alignment. So basically I went to him for a month, and he helped me get it back into alignment. So after about a month, he's like, all right, your spine is, is straight. But I was still having pain. And like, this pain was like really bad. Like it would wake me up out of a sleep 2:00 in the morning. And I'm just like, it was really, really bad. And so I remember just being on my knees, like, God, please help me. Like, please, please, please take this pain away. Like the worst, like pregnancy pain, like none of that even compares to the pain I was feeling, like that intense.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so,
wow.
So I'm just like on my knees and I'm like asking God for help. And it occurred to me that I was already healed. Like it occurred to me that what is pain? I had to what is pain in our mind? Like pain, we have to accept it as a thing. And then we have to look for it, because every day I would look for the pain. So it occurred to me, like, I'm already healed. I just have to get up and accept it. I just have to say thank you. And so I got up with this sense of like release. And I felt like this weight was completely lifted off my shoulders, off my head. And then the next day it was gone. Like all of it, my teeth, my spine, my headaches, my everything was completely gone. And even my mom was like, are you okay? She's like, are you going to go to the chiropractor? I was like, I feel fine. I was like, I'm fine. And so that experience, that to me is considered a miracle. I was like, what do I do from here? And I was like, this thing that God has delivered me from. And I was just like, you know what? I have to make an album. I was like, I have to. And then it was like, I've never written a song before. It's like, how am I going to write? I've never written a song before. How am I going to do this? And so it was kind of just like a leap of faith I started to write lyrics. I started to give thanks in advance for this album already being done. Like I hadn't even written a single song. I haven't written a single song yet. And I was like, I'm so happy and grateful this album is completed. And through that course of the year, I started, getting the materials I needed. I got an interface, I got mics, I got, blah, blah, blah. I was writing, I was recording. And it was like, I was listening back and I'm like, you know what? I can't really sing. And so I remember just posting on Facebook, like, hey, I'm working on an album that's going to come out at the end of this year. And my friend's like from the Navy, Sarah Reasoner, she's like, I didn't know you were a singer. And I was like, I'm not. And she was like, well, let me know if you need any help. And I'm like, all right. And so I thought she was just, kidding or whatever. But I started I put out a single and I was using an auto-tune. And she's like, oh yeah, that's really cool. And she was like, hey, let me know if you need some help. And so I started sending her songs and she would record and she would send them back to me with the lyrics I had written and all this stuff. Because I already had the music was done, the drums was done. I was putting down bass parts, everything. Over the course of a few months, all of this stuff just started to come together as I tried. And so I had these songs and I just needed someone to sing on them. And so I started sending them to her and she was amazing. She was recording these songs and sending them back to me. And so we had by October, we had basically 7-8 songs ready to go to the studio and record. And so, we went. And she flew from Indiana to Florida, where I was at the time, and we tracked the whole vocal part of the recording. And then a month later, we had musicians come in, and we put down the musical parts, the bass, the drums, the guitar, and the album came out 2020 on Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, and so it was just a leap of faith, like I said, because it was completely out of my element, really, to kind of take this direction of, but I felt like I had to share. I've experienced this intense pain for several years, and then it's completely gone. And I'm like, wow. So from this experience, I've learned about forgiveness. I learned about we all have a choice to choose love or to choose, whatever that's not love. And so I realized in this whole thing that I was experiencing it was fear-based. I was carrying weight of, maybe disappointment, maybe anger, and all of this stuff that was bothering me. It was a physical weight. on my body, and it started to affect me, literally affect my spine, it's affecting my, my jaw and all of this stuff. So it was something I felt I needed to share. So my message, my whole my ideology of where to move going forward kind of shifted in the direction of I need to share this. Love is the answer. Let's all, look past our disappointments, look past our anger, look past our fear, and every day let's, be grateful for another day to be alive. Beautiful. And to use music to spread love and joy. Because there are, a lot of people out there who are struggling. They need the message. And so that kind of has, for the last few years, has been my thing. So
beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. I needed to hear that message. And I'm pretty sure a lot of my listeners did. I think it's the kind of message we all need to hear right now.
Right. Well, I'm happy to share. It was definitely like, while you're going through it, you may not know, like, I didn't really understand. It's just like, hey, I'm having these, this pain, and you don't really know why, but it's usually linked to something, it's usually linked to something that you may be holding on to, or something in the past. And because from what I understand, like, that's kind of what everything is, diseases and sickness. It might, be stem from, something else that we may have forgotten about, that may be showing up and coming out in a different way. So.
Yep. Totally with you. Completely agree. I've had quite a few experiences to confirm that theory along my journey as well. My first being the time where I just couldn't play. Like, my right hand could barely move. Out of the blue, came out of nowhere. Doctors couldn't do anything until I found this one doctor who was the sensitive type, had a background in alternative medicine as well, like traditional Chinese medicine. She was like, listen, there's nothing wrong with your hand. And I know this is the last thing you want to hear, but number one, you need to find the source of this problem. Number two, you need a complete overhaul in your lifestyle.
Wow.
And that journey took 3 months, and I did kind of overhaul my lifestyle to the best that I could at that time. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different story. But I had that moment where, like, I was doing everything right, but I knew that there was a very specific moment of surrender I just kind of really had to go with. And I wrote a song. Wow. And that song was called Please. Wow. I finished writing that song, Please, and the next day the pain was gone.
Wow. That's amazing.
So I'm totally with you, sister. Yeah.
I would love to hear it.
Yeah, it actually came out last year on my debut solo piano album. I had some other music out before, but last year during the pandemic, I recorded my first solo piano album. No vocals, nothing, just like a really quiet piano album, and it's on there. Wow. Happy to send you a link.
Yes, please. I would love to hear it. Well, congratulations, and that's really amazing. I mean,
thank you.
To turn something that's, to find healing and to find peace, if you will, in something that's causing you pain I think is the best. Because I mean, like, what can you really do? Like, I even had that thought, I was like, I'm in so much pain. Like, I could barely, for moments, I could not do anything but just hold my head down because the pain was so bad. And so it was like, what can you do? Like, you have to stop. You can't play music. You can barely both, and peace was the number one priority at that point. And so I found out, like, just being grateful for life and for air, and it just kind of shifted my mindset to, finding joy and peace in everything that's around me, and not necessarily focusing on the bad stuff that might be happening in the news and all this other stuff that's so, wrong and depressing. It's just like, I can focus on, this is a beautiful day, and, and stuff like that.
Yep. Amen to that. Music is medicine.
Yeah, that's true.
I think at this phase of my life, after 22 years of doing nothing else, I think I realize more and more every single day that is eventually the highest purpose of music for me anyway, the medicinal quality of it all, at the risk of sounding melodramatic. But for my own practice, that's the real, like, fundament of my major why. You know how they say, what's your why? I think at this point I can safely say my why for practicing music, being a practitioner of sonic arts or whatever you want to call it, is the medicinal part of it. no doubt.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, it's go figure. We're almost at 90 minutes. This tends to happen sometimes. Sorry.
Yeah, Julian is still sleeping. So
thanks, Julian. You're being very kind to us. We appreciate this a lot. We're almost done. You're being very generous with your time. I sincerely appreciate that. There is one last thing I would be very grateful to have you share with my listeners before you go, which is you obviously have a very proactive, positive entrepreneurial mindset in the manner in which you approach your career. And I think a lot of my listeners would be very happy to know more about how they can grow and establish these musical habits, this mindset in their musical journey. What are your pointers for the same?
I guess as I began to start to form my my following and to present stuff online, it was a kind of this awareness of like, I am literally building the stage, like on social media, in which I want to perform. So I have to be mindful of the stuff that I'm putting out.
Beautiful.
Right? Because it's going to attract a certain group of people. And so everyone is essentially a reflection of who you are, the people that enjoy your music, the people that want to talk to you, the people that want to interact with you are just a reflection of who you are. And so I think it's important to kind of understand what your goal is and to understand what you want and why you're doing it. Like you mentioned the why, like I had to figure out why I wanted to do it, because if you don't have a strong why, you're going to lose sight of it. Like, because to be a musician, to invest this much time in something that, you know, takes years and years to become, you know, proficient at, you have to have a really good, you know, why. For some people it's money, but for me it was like, I want to spread the message of love. I want to share what my experience is. I want to share my rhythms. I want to share what God has done for me in my life. And so that is my why. This is why I'm doing it, to help people, to serve, and to share. Like, hey, it's not about me. It's about, you know, it's about just creating and sharing love. And so that's why the name of the album was I Choose Love, because we have a choice. We have a choice to pick fear or anger or whatever, you know, disappointment. We have a choice every single day. Yeah. And so mindfully doing my best to always, you know, look at the situation and be like, I know it looks like this, and most people would react like this, but I'm going to say no, and I'm going to just go to the side of love. So
yes. So that resonates so deeply. Amen to that, sister.
Thanks.
That is a wonderful note to end on. This was an absolute pleasure, an absolute honor. Thanks so much for doing this, Camellia.
Well, no problem. I appreciate you having me. I know we tried to link up. I know it was months ago, and as Julian was in the car, and I guess it wasn't a good time, but it worked out, and I'm grateful to share my story and to learn a little more about you and to hopefully encourage and to share. So I do greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Pleasure is all mine. FYI, all links to your work and your websites and your global presence will be included on episode notes for my listeners. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audiences? Anything I forgot? Anything I missed out on?
No, I think for an hour and a half or so, we touched on a lot. And
I think so too.
Yeah, you had some really good, really great questions. So it kind of it was good to talk and to reflect and to share.
Cheers, I appreciate it. It was easy to ask you these questions. You have a fascinating and inspiring musical background and story. So the questions just kind of came on their own, you know.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. FYI, I'm going to stop record. Gratitude from the bottom of my heart for listening till the very end. Please consider taking a minute to subscribe to our show so you know when the next episode is out. This is a labour of love, one I hope snowballs into one that's sustainable in its attempt to support independent thought and authentic relating. While having you as a regular member of our audience is what makes that a realistic prospect. Much love, and talk soon. Just another voice out in